Clara had always been drawn to the little stone house at the far end of Maple Street, the one with ivy creeping up the chimney and an old brass mailbox that leaned to one side. Most people passed it without a glance. To them, it was just another relic of a neighborhood slowly fading away, but to Clara, it felt alive, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to knock. She first met Mr. Hargrove on a winter morning when the frost clung to every leaf and the sky was the color of steel. She'd been delivering groceries for the local store on weekends to earn a bit of extra cash. When she reached his door, she heard coughing from inside, the kind of cough that sounds like it's fighting to stay alive. She knocked gently. No answer. Then again, louder. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing an old man with thin white hair, watery blue eyes, and a wool cardigan that had seen better days. "Yes," he rasped, his voice brittle like old paper. "Your grocery delivery, sir," Clara said, holding up the paper bag. "From Miller's Market." He blinked at her, confused. "I didn't order any. I think it's the wrong address," she said, glancing at the receipt. "But you might as well keep it, it's just bread and milk." She was about to turn when he said quietly, "I don't drive anymore. I haven't had bread in weeks." That was how it began. From that day on, Clara came by every morning before her shift at the pharmacy. She'd bring groceries, fix his leaky faucet, or just sit with him for an hour while he told stories about the old town, the days when the cobbler's shop still smelled of leather and laughter, when neighbors waved from porches, when his late wife, Eleanor, planted rosebushes that once filled the street with color. He always insisted on paying her. He'd shuffle to the drawer beside his chair, pull out a few crumpled bills, and press them into her palm. But she refused every time. "Mr. Hargrove," she'd laugh softly, "you've got to stop trying to bribe me. I'm not your maid." He'd smile then, that tired, crooked smile that reached only one side of his face. "You remind me of Eleanor. Always stubborn, always kind." There was something sacred about their routine. At precisely 9 every morning, Clara would knock 3 times on the front door, and from inside she'd hear the kettle start to whistle. He liked his tea strong, with just a spoon of honey. While it steeped, she'd open the curtains and let the light pour in, and together they'd talk about everything, the weather, the town gossip, the old photographs that hung crookedly on the wall. Sometimes she'd read to him from the newspaper. He couldn't see well anymore. "Cataracts," he said. When she read aloud, he'd close his eyes and listen like a man trying to capture time itself. For Clara, it wasn't just kindness. It was purpose. Her own family was gone, a mother lost too young, a father who disappeared before she finished school, and a string of lonely apartments that never quite felt like home. But with Mr. Hargrove, there was warmth, familiarity, even laughter. Then came the day that would change everything. It was a Thursday, sunny, unremarkable, except for the sleek black SUV parked in front of the old house. Clara frowned. It looked wildly out of place, gleaming like a shark amid the quiet street. When she stepped inside, the air felt different, tense, heavy. Mr. Hargrove sat in his armchair, his hands trembling slightly on the armrests. Around him stood 3 men in dark suits, each holding folders and papers. One of them, tall, handsome in a cruel sort of way, turned sharply toward Clara. "Who are you?" he demanded. His voice had authority, but not warmth. "I'm Clara," she said, clutching the grocery bag to her chest. "I help Mr. Hargrove. I come every day." The man exchanged a glance with the others, then smiled, thin, rehearsed. "Well, Clara, I'm Eric Hargrove, his grandson, and from now on, you won't be coming anymore." Mr. Hargrove tried to speak, but Eric's hand rested on his shoulder, possessive, silencing. "We'll take it from here," he added smoothly. The next few days felt like a hole had opened in Clara's routine, a silence that pressed down heavier with each morning. The little stone house on Maple Street, once full of light and the scent of tea, now stood behind drawn curtains. Even the ivy seemed to droop as if mourning something unseen. Clara tried to visit again the following day, carrying fresh bread and a small jar of honey, Mr. Hargrove's favorite. But when she reached the porch, the black SUV was still there, gleaming in the pale morning sun like a sentinel. She knocked once, twice, 3 times, the way she always had. The door opened, but it wasn't Mr. Hargrove who stood there. It was Eric. He leaned against the doorframe, a phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her, he sighed, said something short into the receiver, then pocketed it. "I thought I made myself clear," he said. Clara forced a polite smile. I just wanted to bring Mr. Hargrove some things he likes. He's resting, Eric interrupted. He doesn't need anything. She hesitated, clutching the bread a little tighter. He always has breakfast at this hour. I could just. Eric's jaw tightened. Listen, Miss Clara, was it? My grandfather is elderly and confused. He doesn't need strangers meddling in his life anymore. We've taken over his care. His words stung, but his tone cut deeper. Stranger. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Hargrove sitting in his chair by the window. He looked so small, like a shadow of himself. When their eyes met, his lips moved soundlessly. She couldn't make out the words, but she saw the pleading look there. Before she could speak, Eric stepped between them and closed the door. That night, Clara barely slept. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. The way Eric spoke to her, the way he had silenced his grandfather, the locked doors, the sudden secrecy. She tried telling herself maybe Eric was just protective. Maybe he really was taking care of him. But the unease wouldn't go away. Over the next week, she tried to check in several more times. Each attempt ended the same, Eric or one of his suited friends blocking the doorway, saying, he's not up for visitors. Once, she thought she heard Mr. Hargrove's voice from inside, faint and desperate, Clara. But before she could call back, the curtains were drawn shut. It was as if he'd been erased from his own life. The neighborhood began to whisper. Mrs. Langford, who lived across the street, told Clara she'd seen those men carrying boxes out of the house late one night. Not furniture, she said in a hushed tone. Paperwork, maybe, or valuables. Another neighbor said she saw Mr. Hargrove's grandson shouting into the phone one evening, pacing in the driveway, looking furious. He said something about liquidating assets and signing before the deadline, the woman said. Each rumor made Clara's worry grow. Then, on a gray Sunday morning, a frantic knock sounded at her apartment door. It was Mrs. Langford again, her eyes wide with alarm. They took him, Clara. The old man. I saw them load him into a van this morning. Clara's stomach dropped. Where? They said it was a nursing home out of town. Didn't say which one. Within an hour, Clara was on the road. She drove through 2 towns before she found a facility matching the vague description she'd been given. Crestview Manor, a sterile-looking building surrounded by chain-link fences and freshly trimmed hedges. Inside, the receptionist gave her a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Family only, she said when Clara asked to see Mr. Hargrove. I am family, Clara lied desperately. I'm his granddaughter. The receptionist glanced down at her clipboard. Nice try. His grandson already left strict instructions, no visitors. A week later, as autumn began to turn the maple leaves to fire, Clara came home to find an envelope wedged in her mailbox. It was creased, smudged, and marked with shaky handwriting, her name written in uneven letters, as if the writer's hand had trembled the whole time. She knew that handwriting instantly. Her breath caught as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the edges damp and slightly torn. The message was short. Thank you for your kindness. They're selling the house. I tried to stop them. There was no signature, but there didn't need to be one. The moment she saw the spidery loops of the letters, she whispered, "Oh, Mr. Hargrove." Clara sat at her kitchen table for a long time, staring at the note. Something inside her hardened. Whatever those lawyers were doing, whatever Eric was trying to hide, she was done standing by. Mr. Hargrove had no one left in the world but her, and she refused to let him be erased. The next morning, she drove straight to the county property office, clutching the note like a weapon. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when she explained what she wanted. Records on the Hargrove property, she said. Name. The clerk mumbled. Hargrove. Walter Hargrove. A few clicks of the keyboard later, the clerk frowned. That property was just transferred 2 days ago. Clara leaned in. Transferred? To who? The clerk turned the monitor slightly. On the screen, she saw the name of a development company she didn't recognize, Maple Ridge Holdings, LLC. Below it, scanned copies of signatures. Mr. Hargrove's was there, barely legible. But Clara knew his handwriting, the way he always looped his G, like a tiny swirl. The one on the document was stiff, angular, wrong. Her pulse quickened. That's not his signature, she said firmly. He couldn't even hold a pen steady anymore. The clerk gave her a helpless shrug. You can file a complaint if you think it's fraudulent. But if the transaction's finalized, it'll take months to investigate. Months. By then, The house would be gone. Clara left with her heart pounding. She called the nursing home again, no answer. She called local news stations, lawyers, even the police. No one cared. Everyone told her the same thing: family dispute. Nothing we can do. But Clara didn't stop. She gathered every note, every photo she'd taken in the house, every text she'd exchanged with Mr. Hargrove's grocery orders. She found Mrs. Langford and other neighbors willing to speak up about what they'd seen: the shouting, the boxes, the van. Finally, a young reporter named Jonah from the Maple Gazette agreed to listen. "This kind of thing happens all the time," he told her gravely. "Elder exploitation. The tricky part is proving it." Within a week, his story went online. The headline read, "Elderly man forced from home as grandson cashes in on family estate." The internet did the rest. The story exploded. People were furious. Comments flooded in. Donations poured into a crowdfunding page Jonah had linked at the end of the article: "Help Walter Hargrove fight back." Soon, larger media picked up the story. The local authorities couldn't ignore it anymore. Investigators were sent to the nursing home, and the development company's accounts were frozen. What they found was worse than Clara had imagined. The documents were forged, and Eric had been siphoning his grandfather's pension for months. When the news broke, Eric vanished. His lawyers distanced themselves immediately. A warrant was issued. A month later, Clara stood once more on Maple Street. The house looked different, hollow, stripped, but still standing. Through a local charity fund set up in Mr. Hargrove's name, she'd managed to buy it back before it was demolished. She planned to turn it into a small community center, a place for elderly residents who had no one to look after them. In the backyard, under the old oak tree, she found the remains of Eleanor's rosebushes, just dry stems now, brittle under her touch. She spent the whole afternoon replanting them, her hands trembling in the cool soil. As the sun dipped low, she set down the last rose, a deep crimson bloom. She whispered, "You weren't alone, Mr. Hargrove. You never were." The wind rustled softly through the trees, and for a fleeting moment, she could almost hear his voice, gentle and amused, saying, "Stubborn as ever, aren't you?"